My name is Judy Brewster. I was 33 years old the night my parents decided I wasn't worth the drive. Black ice on Route 15. That's all it took. 1 second, I was driving through the mountains with the radio low and the heater humming against my legs. I'd just finished a double shift at St. Anne's Pediatric ICU and I was halfway through the 3-hour drive home for Thanksgiving. The next second, my tires lost traction. The Camry spun sideways. Headlights flashed white across the windshield. Then metal screamed. The guardrail punched through the driver's side like a spear and the entire car folded around me. I remember the sound more than anything. Not the crash itself. The ribs breaking. A deep wet pop inside my chest. Then cold air pouring through shattered glass. Copper in my mouth. The steering wheel crushing against my lungs. After that, fragments. Voices. Flashing lights. Somebody yelling for the jaws. A paramedic saying, "Stay with me." Then nothing. When I woke up, 20 hours had disappeared. I was in recovery at Geisinger Medical Center with a drainage tube in my side, stitches across my abdomen, and pain so sharp every breath felt borrowed. The room was dark except for fluorescent light bleeding through the hallway blinds. I turned my head. The chair beside my bed was empty. No flowers. No jacket. No family. Just a heart monitor ticking beside me like a metronome. And on the whiteboard near the sink, written in blue marker. Family notified. Declined to come. At first, I thought maybe I was still drugged. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they were coming later. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. No voicemail. Just a lock screen photo from Christmas 2 years earlier. Me and my mother smiling at the camera like we belonged to each other. A nurse named Dana came in around noon to check my vitals. She adjusted my four quietly, then sat on the edge of the bed the way nurses do when they're about to tell you something that hurts worse than the injury. "Your family knows you're here," she said gently. I swallowed against the dryness in my throat. "Okay. I called your emergency contact at 6 this morning." I waited. Dana glanced down at the chart before looking back at me. "Your mother said they were hosting Thanksgiving dinner." I stared at her. "She said they'd come if things got worse." The words didn't land right away. Sometimes trauma delays impact. Like a crash wave hitting shore seconds after the explosion. "What exactly did she say?" Dana hesitated. Then quietly. She said, "We'll come if she dies." Something inside me split open then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like fabric tearing along a seam that had already been weakening for years. I turned my face toward the wall so Dana wouldn't see me cry. Because here's the thing about being a PICU nurse. You learn how to stay calm while your world collapses. You learn how to monitor catastrophe without becoming part of it. So I lay there with 4 broken ribs and internal stitches and did what I always did. I assessed the data. My mother chose Thanksgiving dinner over her daughter's emergency surgery. That was the data. And honestly, some part of me wasn't surprised. I should explain my family before I explain what happened next. My younger sister Megan was the golden child. Beautiful. Organized. Charming in a way that made older women soften instantly around her. She hosted brunches. Sent handwritten thank you cards. Never forgot birthdays. Meanwhile, I worked night shifts in a pediatric ICU where children stopped breathing for a living. I showed up to holidays exhausted with indentations from my mask still carved into my cheeks. My phone buzzed during dinner because patients coded at inconvenient times. My mother used to introduce Megan as our daughter. And me? This is Judy. She works with sick children. Bless her heart. If you grew up in Pennsylvania, you know bless her heart isn't kindness. It's dismissal wrapped in lace. Somewhere in my 20s I stopped expecting equal treatment. I recalibrated. That's what nurses do. You accept the numbers and adjust accordingly. So I worked holidays. Covered doubles. Built a life that didn't depend on family approval. And for a long time, I convinced myself that was enough. Until I woke up alone after almost dying and realized something terrible. If I had died that night, my mother would have shown up for the funeral wearing pearls and grief like theater makeup. And everyone would have believed she loved me. On my second day in the hospital, a woman from patient services knocked on my door carrying a clipboard and a small rectangular package wrapped in brown paper. Her name tag said Lorraine. Miss Brewster? I nodded. A gentleman dropped this off yesterday evening. She set the package carefully onto my tray table. He also paid your hospital bill. I blinked at her. My, what? Your account, she repeated. Surgery, hospitalization, anesthesia. Everything. The room tilted slightly. That's not possible. She checked her clipboard. He paid in full. I stared at the package. Brown craft paper. White kitchen string. Simple. Old-fashioned. He left a message too, Lorraine added. He said not to open it until you get home. Did he leave a name? She shook her head. Tall older man. Black wool jacket. Smelled like cedar. Then she left me there staring at a mystery box and an erased $80,000 debt. I didn't touch the package for the rest of the day. I just sat there listening to the heart monitor tick while questions stacked inside my head. Who pays a stranger's hospital bill? And why me? They discharged me Friday afternoon. Nobody from my family came. Not my mother. Not my father. Not Megan. My coworker Renata drove 45 minutes from Harrisburg to pick me up. She brought me a turkey sandwich from Wawa and pretended not to notice that no one else had shown up. That's another thing nurses understand. Sometimes silence is compassion. Back at my apartment, she helped me inside, set my medications on the counter, microwaved broth because I couldn't lift my arm high enough to reach the buttons, then squeezed my shoulder gently before leaving. The apartment went quiet. Cold. Still. The cedar-smelling package sat on my kitchen table waiting for me. I stared at it for nearly an hour before my phone rang Saturday morning. Unknown number. 570 area code. Miss Brewster, the man said. My name is Daniel Frost. I'm an estate attorney in Dunor. Something about the way he said estate made my stomach tighten. I'm calling regarding your grandfather, Walter Brewster. I sat upright too quickly and pain exploded through my ribs. Walter Brewster. I hadn't heard that name out loud in 16 years. Your grandfather passed away 3 weeks ago, Frost said softly. My throat closed. 3 weeks. My grandfather had been dead for 3 weeks and nobody told me. Not my father. Not my mother. Nobody. I'm sorry, Frost continued. Walter instructed me to contact you personally after certain conditions were met. What conditions? A medical emergency among them. Frost noticed the silence. You received the box. Yes. He wanted you to have it personally. I swallowed hard. Why? Another pause. Then. Because he knew your family wouldn't come. I met Daniel Frost the following Tuesday. His office sat on Main Street in Dunor inside a narrow brick building that smelled like leather, dust, and old paper. He was in his late 60s with silver hair and careful movements. And hanging beside the coat rack. A black wool jacket. The same one Lorraine described. You paid my hospital bill, I said immediately. Frost folded his glasses carefully. No, he replied. Walter did. My chest tightened. Before he died, your grandfather created standing instructions for emergencies involving you. I stared at him. He established a trust in 2011. Fully funded. Revocable during his lifetime. Irrevocable upon death. He slid paperwork across the desk. In the center of the page was my full name. Judith and Brewster. Sole beneficiary. I couldn't breathe for a second. You're saying my grandfather loved you very much, Frost finished quietly. The words hit harder than the crash. Because I had spent 16 years believing my grandfather abandoned me. That he stopped calling. Stopped caring. Stopped showing up. But according to Frost, that wasn't true at all. Walter Brewster had spent 16 years trying to reach me. And my mother made sure he never could. Frost nodded toward the cedar box sitting between us. You should open it now. My hands shook as I untied the string. Inside were 16 sealed envelopes. One for every year since I was 17. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every graduation. Every milestone. Letters. Letters my grandfather wrote me after my mother cut him out of our lives. The first 3 had postage marks and return stamps. Returned to sender. Never delivered. After that, he stopped mailing them. But he never stopped writing. Underneath the letters sat scholarship records from my nursing school. I flipped through them slowly. Then stopped cold. The private healthcare grant that paid for half my tuition came from Walter Brewster's trust. I looked up at Frost in disbelief. He paid for nursing school? He followed your career closely. There was one more item at the bottom of the box. A photograph. My nursing school graduation. Rows of chairs. Students in caps and gowns. And standing quietly near the back exit in a black wool jacket. My grandfather. Watching me. He was there. All those years. He was there. I opened the final envelope addressed directly to me. Inside was one sentence written in blocky carpenter handwriting. You were never alone, kiddo. I broke then. Completely. Not graceful tears. Not movie tears. The kind that rip out of your chest like something dying. 16 years. 16 years believing I'd been abandoned by a man who loved me enough to stand in the last row of my life without asking for credit. When I finally stopped crying, Frost handed me another file. Inside were copies of returned birthday cards. Christmas gifts. Letters. 47 separate items intercepted by my mother over 16 years. And suddenly the story I'd lived my entire life inside began rearranging itself. Walter didn't disappear. He was erased. That night I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring. Judy. No sweetness. No concern. Just my name. Mom, I said carefully, why did you cut Grandpa Walter off? Silence. Then. You don't understand what he put this family through. What did he do? He was difficult. That's not an answer. Her voice sharpened. Don't go digging, Judy. I felt something cold settle inside me. Like you didn't come to the hospital? Silence. Then the line disconnected. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. The next person I called was Aunt Pam. My father's younger sister. The relative who still mailed me birthday cards every year. When I asked what really happened 16 years ago, she sighed heavily. Walter confronted your mother at Thanksgiving, she admitted. About what? The way she treated you. My throat tightened. Pam continued quietly. He asked why you were seated with the children every year while Megan sat beside your mother at the head of the table. I closed my eyes. I remembered that table. I remembered laughing too loudly with younger cousins because it hurt less than noticing where I wasn't seated. Your mother hated being questioned publicly, Pam said. Especially when the question was true. Within weeks, according to Pam, my mother began telling people Walter was unstable, controlling, senile, dangerous. And because my father never contradicted her, the lie became history. Meanwhile, my grandfather sat alone for 16 years writing letters to a granddaughter who thought he abandoned her. A week later my phone exploded with calls. Mother. Father. Megan. Texts. Voicemails. Because they'd finally learned about the estate. Funny how grief arrives once money does. My mother's voicemail was almost impressive in its performance. Sweetheart, we've been so worried about you. Worried. Not worried enough to drive 3 hours when I was bleeding internally. But worried enough now that Walter's money existed. I deleted the voicemail. Then I called Frost. She wants a family dinner, I said. A reconciliation. I expected that. I want you there. There was a pause. Walter hated scenes, Frost admitted. I'm not planning a scene, I replied calmly. I'm planning documentation. That made him laugh softly. Very nice of you. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday night. I spent the week preparing like I prepared for Code Blues. Methodically. I organized the letters chronologically. Printed copies of the trust documents. Obtained my medical records, including the note documenting my mother's exact words after the crash. Will come if she dies. I made 3 copies. 1 for me. 1 for Frost. 1 hidden with Renata. Because trauma nurses always create backups. Saturday arrived gray and cold. The drive to Dunor took 3 hours. Same road. Same mountains. Same stretch of Route 15 where my car had folded against steel 2 weeks earlier. I passed the damaged guardrail without stopping. There was already a reflector cone beside it. Life moves on quickly after almost killing you. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, dusk had settled over the neighborhood. 8 cars lined the curb. My mother had invited witnesses. Good. So had I. She answered the door wearing pearl earrings and a cream sweater. Judy. Sweetheart. The performance started immediately. She hugged me carefully because even my mother understood broken ribs. Inside, the dining room glowed warm beneath chandelier light. White linen. Good china. Pinterest centerpieces. The same polished version of family she'd been curating my entire life. Megan poured wine at the sideboard. My father stood near the fireplace with his hands buried in his pockets. Aunt Pam caught my eye from the kitchen and gave the smallest nod. She knew. Dinner began at 6. At 6:15 the doorbell rang. I stood immediately. That's for me. My mother's smile flickered. I opened the door. Daniel Frost stepped inside wearing the black wool jacket. And suddenly the room changed temperature. This is Daniel Frost, I said evenly. Grandpa Walter's attorney. Silence. Complete silence. Frost sat calmly at the table while soup was served. My mother recovered first. She always recovered first. Walter would have wanted this family united, she announced sweetly, folding her napkin. Whatever he left behind should be shared fairly. There it was. Not concern. Not apology. The ask. I let her finish. Then I opened my bag. One by one, I placed the letters onto the table. 16 envelopes. Yellowed edges. Walter's handwriting. These are letters Grandpa wrote me every year for 16 years. Nobody moved. He mailed the first 3, I continued quietly. Mom returned them unopened. My mother's face drained white. I kept going. These are scholarship records showing Grandpa paid for half my nursing school. Another stack hit the table. These are copies of 47 cards and gifts you intercepted. Another stack. And finally, my medical chart. I laid it directly beside my soup bowl. The hospital called my mother while I was in emergency surgery after the crash. My voice stayed level. Clinical. Steady. The chart note reads exactly as follows. I looked directly at my mother while I read. Family notified, 0605. Mother stated, we will come if she dies. Declined to attend. Silence swallowed the room whole. No one even breathed. Then Carol Brewster stood up so quickly her chair scraped backward across hardwood. You're twisting everything, she snapped. The pearls. The sweater. The perfect hostess smile. All cracking at once. Walter manipulated you. He poisoned this family against me. No, Aunt Pam said softly from across the table. He told the truth. My mother turned toward her like she'd been slapped. You stay out of this. For 16 years? Pam shot back quietly. I already did. The room tightened. My father still hadn't spoken. Not once. He sat staring at the letters like they physically hurt to look at. My mother's voice rose higher. You think because he left you money that makes you special? No, I answered calmly. I think he loved me. That hit. I saw it hit. Because that was the one thing she could never rewrite. Walter loved me openly. Consistently. Quietly. And she knew it. Frost opened his briefcase. The trust is irrevocable, he stated professionally. Judith Brewster is sole beneficiary. Any legal challenge activates the no contest clause. Megan finally spoke. So there's nothing we can do? No, Frost replied simply. That's when my mother started crying. Loudly. Violently. Theatrically. The kind of crying designed to pull focus back toward her. How could you humiliate me like this? She sobbed. And suddenly I understood something important. Those tears weren't about losing me. They were about losing control of the story. I looked at my father then. Really looked at him. At the man who let his wife erase his own father. The man who let me wake up alone after surgery. The man who kept choosing silence because silence was easier than courage. His chin trembled once. Just once. But he still said nothing. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I gathered the letters slowly and returned them to the cedar box. 16 years of proof that love can survive even when contact doesn't. Then I stood. You said you'd come if I died, I told my mother quietly. I lived. I picked up the box. We're done. Nobody stopped me. Not my mother. Not Megan. Not my father. Only Aunt Pam stood and walked beside me to the front door. As I stepped outside, cold November air hit my face. My ribs ached sharply for one clean second. Then softened. Like a stitch finally pulling loose. Healing feels strange sometimes. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just lighter. 6 weeks later, I signed paperwork establishing the Walter Brewster Fund. Scholarships for first-generation nursing students who lacked family support. Kids sitting alone at graduations. Kids working double shifts while everyone else had parents in the front row. The first recipient was a girl from Allentown who grew up in foster care. She wrote a thank you letter to the committee. And when I read it, I thought about my grandfather sitting alone at his kitchen table years earlier reading mine. My mother called once after the dinner. I didn't answer. My father never called. Megan texted saying we should talk. I replied, I don't think we should. Aunt Pam and I still have dinner every other week. She tells me stories about Walter. How he built the cedar box by hand over nearly a year. How he sanded the corners smooth enough that no seam showed. How he told her once, it's for Judy when the time comes. My scars faded by February. Thin white lines across my side. And every time I take a deep breath without pain now, I think about the final sentence my grandfather wrote me. You were never alone, kiddo. I used to think family meant shared blood. Shared holidays. Shared names. I was wrong. Family is the person standing quietly in the last row of your life, making sure you never fall completely alone. Even when they can't stand beside you openly. Even when nobody notices them. Even when love has to arrive disguised as a scholarship, a hospital bill, or a cedar box tied with kitchen string. That's what my grandfather gave me. Not money. Not inheritance. Proof. Proof that I was loved the entire time. And honestly, that saved me more than the surgery did.